Ella Johnson had always been a woman of quiet determination. As a history teacher in the small town of Greenville, she had spent years inspiring her students to think critically, stand up for what was right, and learn from the mistakes of the past. Life in Greenville was uneventful but content. The town's rhythms were steady: morning coffee at the diner, evening walks through tree-lined streets, and the occasional weekend farmers market. For Ella, it was home, a sanctuary where she was both respected and loved. But today was different. Today, she was embarking on a journey that would turn her predictable life upside down. The day began like any other, with Ella rising early to the sound of birds outside her window. She packed a modest suitcase the night before, ensuring everything was in order for her flight to Seattle, where she would finally reunite with her younger sister, Maya, after 3 long years. The distance between them had been more than physical. Life had a way of pulling people in different directions. Maya was a nurse who had been on the front lines of the pandemic, while Ella had anchored herself in the classroom, guiding her students through the turbulence of history as they lived through it. The reunion was a long time coming, and Ella was determined to make it special. She arrived at Greenville Regional Airport with plenty of time to spare. The airport was small, almost quaint compared to the sprawling hubs in major cities. She loved its simplicity: no long security lines, no bustling crowds. Just a few gates and a handful of friendly staff who greeted passengers like old friends. Ella checked her bag and picked up her boarding pass from the counter, chatting briefly with the clerk who recognized her from the local high school. With her pass in hand, she made her way through security, smiling politely at the TSA agents. The terminal was a mix of travelers, families heading on vacations, business people typing away on laptops, and retirees flipping through novels. Ella found a seat near her gate and pulled out a book. The story drew her in immediately, its vivid descriptions and poignant dialogue resonating deeply with her. Lost in the pages, she barely noticed the announcement calling her flight to board. Snapping her book shut, she grabbed her bag and joined the short line at the gate. The agent at the gate was a young man with a wide smile and a friendly demeanor. He scanned her boarding pass without a second glance and waved her through. As she walked down the jet bridge, Ella felt a flutter of excitement. She loved flying, the feeling of being suspended between earth and sky, the vast expanse of clouds stretching endlessly. It was a reminder of how small yet connected the world was. Ella found her seat, a cozy window spot in the middle of the plane, and settled in. The passengers trickled in, stowing their luggage and chatting in hushed tones. A young couple sat across the aisle, their baby cooing softly. An older man in a suit reclined in his seat, scrolling through emails on his tablet. Ella glanced out the window as the plane taxied to the runway, the anticipation building with each passing moment. The flight itself began uneventfully. The engines roared to life, the plane ascended into the sky, and the seatbelt sign flickered off. Ella opened her book again, the story pulling her in as the world below faded into a patchwork of clouds and earth. She occasionally sipped from the cup of water, handed whispers erupted around her. Passengers exchanged puzzled glances as Ella unbuckled her seatbelt and followed the attendant. She felt the weight of their eyes on her back, the buzz of speculation spreading like wildfire. Her mind raced with questions. What could possibly be wrong? Had there been a mix-up with her ticket? In the galley, Ella was met by another flight attendant and the purser, who held a clipboard. Their expressions were guarded, a mixture of professionalism and unease. The purser spoke first, his voice low. "Ms. Johnson, there appears to be an issue with your boarding pass," he said. "Our records indicate that this seat was booked under someone else's name." Ella's heart skipped a beat. "That's not possible," she said, her voice steady despite the rising tension. "I booked this flight weeks ago and checked in at the counter this morning without any issues." The purser nodded, but his eyes betrayed doubt. "Do you have any additional identification we can verify?" Ella handed over her driver's license, her hands trembling slightly. The purser examined it and made a call on his radio, speaking in hushed tones. Minutes felt like hours as Ella stood there, her mind replaying every step of the process. She was certain she hadn't made a mistake. So why was this happening? "Please come with me, ma'am," the attendant said, her tone leaving no room for argument. Whispers erupted around her. Passengers exchanged puzzled glances as Ella unbuckled her seatbelt and followed the attendant. She felt the weight of their eyes on her back, the buzz of speculation spreading like wildfire. Her mind raced with questions. What could possibly be wrong? Had there been a mix-up with her ticket? In the galley, Ella was met by another flight attendant and the purser, who held a clipboard. Their expressions were guarded, a mixture of professionalism and unease. The purser spoke first, his voice low. "Ms. Johnson, there appears to be an issue with your boarding pass," he said. "Our records indicate that this seat was booked under someone else's name." Ella's heart skipped a beat. "That's not possible," she said, her voice steady despite the rising tension. "I booked this flight weeks ago and checked in at the counter this morning without any issues." The purser nodded, but his eyes betrayed doubt. "Do you have any additional identification we can verify?" Ella handed over her driver's license, her hands trembling slightly. The purser examined it and made a call on his radio, speaking in hushed tones. Minutes felt like hours as Ella stood there, her mind replaying every step of the process. She was certain she hadn't made a mistake. So why was this happening? When the purser ended the call, he turned to her with an apologetic smile that didn't reach his eyes. "We're still looking into it, ma'am, but for now, we need you to remain here until we can resolve the matter." Ella felt a wave of indignation but forced herself to stay calm. "With all due respect, I have done nothing wrong. This is clearly a mistake, and I would appreciate it if you resolved it quickly." The purser nodded again, but his response was interrupted by the arrival of the captain. A tall man with salt and pepper hair and an air of authority, he stepped into the galley, his presence commanding attention. He listened to the purser's summary of the situation, his expression growing more serious by the second. When he finally addressed Ella, his tone was measured but firm. "Ms. Johnson, we understand your frustration, but this is a security matter, and we need to ensure everything is in order." Ella stared at him, her composure slipping. "A security matter," she repeated, her voice rising. "I'm a teacher from Greenville, traveling to visit my sister. How is that a security matter?" The captain didn't answer immediately. Instead, he gestured toward a nearby crew member and instructed them to contact the airline's ground operations. As the minutes dragged on, Ella couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to this than a simple mix-up. The tension was palpable, the whispers among passengers growing louder as the story spread. When the call finally came through, the captain's expression shifted from concern to shock. Equals inside the cockpit, Ella felt the weight of the moment pressing down on her like a heavy fog. The tight, humming space seemed to pulse with tension. The captain gestured for her to sit in one of the crew's seats near the door, and Ella complied, her mind spinning. She had no idea what she was about to hear, but the look in the captain's eyes told her it was significant. "We've contacted ground operations," the captain began, his voice calm but serious, "and they've verified that your boarding pass does not match our passenger manifest. According to their records, someone else should be occupying your seat on this flight." Ella's breath hitched, and she clenched her hands to keep them from trembling. "That's impossible. I checked in this morning without any issues. My ticket was confirmed weeks ago." The captain nodded. "I understand, Ms. Johnson, and I believe you when you say there's been a mistake. But this discrepancy isn't something we can overlook. Protocol requires that we treat such situations as potential security concerns until they're fully resolved." "Security concerns?" Ella's voice rose in disbelief. "I'm a teacher traveling to visit my sister. How could I possibly pose a security threat?" Before the captain could respond, the purser entered the cockpit, holding a tablet. "Sir," he said, "I've just received a flagged report from the airline's database. It appears this ticket was purchased using a stolen credit card." The words hit Ella like a punch to the gut. "Stolen credit card," she repeated, her voice barely above a whisper. "That's ridiculous. I used my own card to book this flight." "Do you have proof of purchase?" the purser asked, his tone more skeptical than accusatory. Ella's mind raced. Her bank app was on her phone, but with the plane in the air, there was no way to access it. "The only proof I have is on my phone," she said, gesturing to her bag. "But I can't show you while we're in flight." The captain and purser exchanged a glance. "Understood," the captain said. "Once we land, we'll investigate further. For now, I'd like you to remain calm and cooperative. This is likely a misunderstanding, but we need to follow procedure." Ella felt a surge of frustration. "Procedure? Do your procedures include humiliating an innocent passenger in front of an entire flight? Because that's exactly what's happening right now." The captain's expression softened. "I understand how this must feel, Ms. Johnson. Please know we're not accusing you of anything. We're just doing our job." "Your job," Ella said bitterly, "seems to involve treating me like a criminal without any evidence." The purser cleared his throat awkwardly. "If you'd prefer, we can move you to a private seat at the back of the plane until we land. It might be more comfortable for you there." Ella considered the offer. On one hand, she wanted to stay put and assert her innocence. On the other, the thought of returning to her seat under the judgmental gaze of the other passengers was unbearable. Reluctantly, she nodded. "Fine." The captain nodded to the purser, who escorted Ella out of the cockpit and down the aisle. As they walked, Ella kept her eyes forward, refusing to acknowledge the curious stares and hushed whispers. She was led to a small, secluded area near the back of the plane, where a crew seat had been prepared for her. She sank into the seat, her mind still racing. How could this have happened? She thought back to the moment she purchased her ticket. It had been a routine transaction, nothing unusual, nothing suspicious. And yet, here she was, accused of boarding a flight with a stolen ticket. The absurdity of it all made her want to laugh, but the gravity of the situation kept her silent. As the plane continued its journey, Ella's thoughts shifted to her sister, Maya. How would she react when Ella told her what had happened? Would she believe her? Maya was fiercely protective, always ready to go to war for the people she loved. Ella could almost hear her sister's indignant voice demanding justice on her behalf. The thought brought a flicker of comfort to an otherwise bleak situation. About an hour later, the purser returned to check on her. "Ms. Johnson," he said, his tone softer this time, "we've contacted ground operations again, and they're pulling up the original purchase details for your ticket. We should have more information by the time we land." Ella looked up at him, her eyes narrowing. "And in the meantime, I'm supposed to sit here like a prisoner?" The purser hesitated. "I'm sorry. I truly am. But this is standard procedure in cases like this." "Cases like this," Ella repeated bitterly. "Do you even hear yourself? I'm not a case. I'm a person. An innocent person who's been accused of something she didn't do." The purser shifted uncomfortably. "I'll make sure you're among the first to deplane when we land," he said. "And I'll personally escort you to the airline's customer service desk to get this sorted out." Ella said nothing, her anger simmering just beneath the surface. She watched as the purser retreated to the front of the plane, leaving her alone once more. She stared out the window. At the endless expanse of clouds, her thoughts a chaotic jumble of frustration, fear, and disbelief. As the plane began its descent, Ella braced herself for what was to come. She had no idea how this would end, but one thing was certain, she wasn't going down without a fight. Whatever misunderstanding had led to this nightmare, she would clear her name and hold the airline accountable for the way they had treated her. When the plane finally touched down, Ella's heart pounded in her chest. Passengers gathered their belongings, glancing at her with a mixture of curiosity and suspicion. She stayed seated, waiting for the purser to return as promised. True to his word, he appeared moments later, gesturing for her to follow him. Ella walked down the aisle with her head held high, refusing to let the humiliation show on her face. As she stepped off the plane and into the terminal, she felt the weight of the ordeal lifting slightly. But she knew this was far from over. The real fight was just beginning. The bustling terminal was a stark contrast to the suffocating tension Ella had endured on the plane. People hurried to their gates, families reunited with tearful embraces, and announcements echoed overhead, creating a cacophony that felt both comforting and overwhelming. Yet amidst the commotion, Ella felt isolated, like a storm cloud in a sunny sky. The purser, still maintaining a professional yet uneasy demeanor, gestured for her to follow him to the airline's customer service desk. Ella's steps were heavy as she walked through the terminal, her mind replaying the events of the flight in an endless loop. The stares, the whispers, the accusations, all of it felt like a surreal nightmare. She thought of her students back in Greenville. What would they think if they saw their composed and confident teacher reduced to this state of uncertainty and indignity? She clenched her fists, determined to prove her innocence and restore her dignity. When they arrived at the customer service desk, a woman in a neatly pressed uniform greeted them with a polite smile that faltered slightly when she saw Ella's expression. The purser quickly explained the situation, and the woman's face turned serious as she motioned for Ella to sit down in a nearby chair. "We're going to look into this right away, Ms. Johnson," the woman said. "Can I get the ticket confirmation number or any proof of purchase you might have?" Ella reached into her bag and pulled out her phone, grateful to finally have access to her banking app now that the plane was on the ground. After a few taps, she located the receipt for the ticket and handed her phone to the woman. "This is the receipt," she said firmly. "I booked this ticket with my own card. I've done nothing wrong." The woman studied the screen and nodded. "Thank you. This will help us cross-reference with our records." She typed rapidly on her computer, her fingers flying over the keyboard. Ella watched her intently, every keystroke feeling like it could unlock the truth. Minutes ticked by as the woman delved deeper into the airline system. Occasionally, she frowned. Or muttered something under her breath, further heightening Ella's anxiety. Finally, the woman's expression shifted from focused to confused, and she turned to Ella with a furrowed brow. "Ms. Johnson," she began cautiously, "it appears there's been a very unusual mix-up. According to our records, your ticket was flagged because it was purchased using a card linked to fraudulent activity. However," she hesitated, glancing at the purser before continuing. "The name on the card doesn't match yours. In fact, it's registered to someone completely different." Ella felt a spark of hope amidst her confusion. "Exactly. That's what I've been trying to tell you. I used my own card, and I have the receipt to prove it." The woman nodded. "I see that now. What's strange is that your ticket and this fraudulent card are somehow linked in our system. It's as if two separate transactions were merged into one, causing this entire debacle." Ella's brow furrowed. "How does something like that even happen?" The woman exchanged a glance with the purser, who shrugged helplessly. "It's extremely rare," she admitted. "But it can happen due to errors in the system or even deliberate tampering." "Tampering?" Ella repeated, her voice rising slightly. "Are you saying someone did this on purpose?" The woman hesitated, clearly uncomfortable. "It's possible, though we can't say for sure without a deeper investigation. What I can confirm is that this wasn't your fault, Ms. Johnson. I'm so sorry for the inconvenience and distress this has caused you." Ella's relief was tempered by lingering anger. "An apology doesn't erase what I went through on that flight," she said, her voice steady but firm. I was humiliated in front of dozens of people, treated like a criminal for something I didn't do. How does the airline plan to make this right? The woman nodded, her expression earnest. You're absolutely right, and we take full responsibility for what happened. I'll escalate this to our management team immediately. In the meantime, we'd like to offer you a complimentary flight voucher and an upgrade to first class for your return trip. Ella crossed her arms, unimpressed. A voucher and an upgrade? That's your idea of making this right? Before the woman could respond, a new voice interrupted. Ms. Johnson? Ella turned to see a man in a dark suit approaching. His demeanor was calm but authoritative, and his badge identified him as part of the airline's corporate security team. I'm Dan Fields, head of security for this airline. I've been briefed on your situation, and I'd like to personally apologize for what you've been through. Ella raised an eyebrow. You're here to apologize too? Seems like a lot of people are sorry, but no one's explaining why this happened. Dan nodded, acknowledging her frustration. You're right. And I intend to give you answers. Would you mind stepping into a private room so we can discuss this further? Ella hesitated but eventually agreed, following Dan to a nearby conference room. Inside, he gestured for her to sit before taking a seat across from her. He placed a folder on the table and opened it, revealing several documents. Ms. Johnson, Dan began, it appears that someone deliberately targeted your ticket. Based on the timing and nature of the fraudulent activity, we believe this was no random mistake. The individual who tampered with your ticket also has a history of engaging in identity theft and financial fraud. Ella's stomach turned. Why would someone target me? I'm just a teacher from a small town. Dan looked at her sympathetically. That's what we're trying to figure out. It's possible that your information was compromised during a data breach, or you may have been targeted for another reason entirely. Either way, we're taking this very seriously. Ella's mind raced. She thought back to the past few months, trying to remember if anything unusual had happened. A strange email? A suspicious phone call? Nothing came to mind. So what happens now? She asked. We'll launch a full investigation, Dan assured her. In the meantime, we'll provide you with resources to protect your identity and ensure this doesn't happen again. And, of course, we'll compensate you for the inconvenience and distress this has caused. Ella leaned back in her chair, her emotions a whirlwind of relief, anger, and lingering uncertainty. I just want my life to go back to normal, she said quietly. Dan nodded. And we'll do everything we can to make that happen. As she left the conference room, Ella felt a mix of emotions. She was relieved to have her name cleared but unsettled by the knowledge that someone had deliberately targeted her. She resolved to uncover the truth, no matter how long it took. What had started as an ordinary trip to visit her sister had turned into a nightmare, and the mystery was far from over. Ella walked out of the conference room with her mind spinning, the weight of the situation sinking in deeper. The idea that someone had deliberately targeted her was unsettling, and the vague assurances from the airline's security chief weren't enough to quell her unease. The terminal's chaos seemed distant as she moved through it in a daze, her bag slung over her shoulder and her phone clutched tightly in her hand. Her first instinct was to call her sister, Maya. Maya had always been the person Ella turned to when things went sideways, her fierce personality a counterbalance to Ella's more measured approach to conflict. As the phone rang, Ella imagined her sister's reaction, anger, indignation, and, most likely, an immediate call to action. Ella? Maya's voice came through the line, warm and familiar. Are you here already? I thought your flight wasn't landing for another hour. Ella sighed, leaning against a column near the baggage claim. I need to talk to you. Something happened on the flight. The concern in Maya's voice was immediate. What do you mean? Are you okay? What happened? Ella explained everything, being accused of having a fake boarding pass, the humiliation of being confronted in front of other passengers, the discovery of a fraudulent transaction linked to her ticket, and the unsettling revelation that it might have been deliberate. By the time she finished, Maya was fuming. "They targeted you?" Maya said incredulously. "Why? Who would do something like that?" "I don't know," Ella admitted. "That's what the airline's investigating, but I can't just sit around and wait for answers. I need to figure this out." "You're damn right we're figuring this out," Maya said firmly. "I'll be at the airport in 20 minutes. Don't go anywhere." As Ella ended the call, she felt a small measure of relief. Maya's unwavering support was a comfort, even in the face of so much uncertainty. Still, the questions gnawed at her. Who could possibly want to harm her? And why? She retrieved her luggage and found a quiet corner of the terminal to wait for her sister. As she sat there, her thoughts turned to her students back in Greenville. She had always prided herself on teaching them to stand up for what was right, to seek the truth no matter how difficult it might be. Now, she realized, she needed to take her own advice. When Maya arrived, her presence was like a burst of energy. Dressed in her usual bold colors and exuding confidence, she strode into the terminal with purpose. Ella barely had time to stand before Maya enveloped her in a hug. "You okay?" Maya asked, pulling back to study Ella's face. "I'm fine," Ella said, though her voice lacked conviction. "Just shaken." "Let's get out of here," Maya said. "We'll figure this out together." The sisters left the airport and headed to Maya's apartment, where the first order of business was piecing together the puzzle. They sat at the kitchen table, laptops open and papers spread out in front of them. Maya, ever the strategist, quickly organized their approach. "Let's start with the basics," Maya said. "When did you buy the ticket? Did anything weird happen around that time?" Ella thought back to the day she had booked her flight. It had been a regular weekday evening, and she remembered sitting at her desk after grading papers, scrolling through airline options. "Nothing weird," she said. "I booked it online like I always do. Got the confirmation email, everything seemed normal." "And you haven't noticed anything unusual since then?" Maya pressed. "Strange emails, odd charges on your credit card, anything like that?" Ella shook her head. "No. My credit card statement looks fine, and I haven't gotten any phishing emails or anything." Maya frowned, tapping her fingers on the table. "Okay, then let's think about motive. Who benefits from this? Do you have any enemies? Anyone who might want to mess with you?" Ella laughed humorlessly. "Enemies? Maya, I'm a middle school teacher. My biggest enemies are unruly 8th graders who don't want to do their homework." Maya smirked. "Fair point. But think broader. Have you had any conflicts recently? With colleagues, neighbors, anyone?" Ella hesitated. She thought about the past year, her interactions with co-workers, her involvement in the local community, even her online presence. Nothing stood out. "No," she said finally. "I can't think of anyone who would do this." Maya leaned back in her chair, her expression thoughtful. "Then maybe this isn't about you personally. Maybe it's random." "Random?" Ella repeated. "How does that explain the fraudulent transaction being linked to my ticket? That doesn't feel random to me." Maya nodded slowly. "You're right. It's too specific to be a coincidence. But if it's not random and it's not personal, then what is it?" The question hung in the air, heavy and unanswered. Ella stared at her laptop screen, her mind racing. She opened her email and scrolled through her inbox, looking for anything she might have missed. Suddenly, something caught her eye, a message from the airline dated 2 weeks before her flight. "Maya, look at this," Ella said, pointing to the screen. The subject line read, "Important update about your upcoming flight." Maya leaned over to read the email. What does it say? Ella clicked it open and began to read aloud. Dear Ms. Johnson, due to a technical issue, we have made changes to your flight reservation. Please review the attached itinerary to confirm your updated travel details. That's weird, Maya said. Did you notice this email when you got it? No, Ella admitted. I must have overlooked it. She opened the attachment, which displayed a PDF of her updated itinerary. At first glance, everything seemed normal. The dates, times, and flight numbers matched her original booking. But then her eyes landed on the ticket number, and her stomach dropped. Maya, she said, her voice trembling, this isn't my original ticket number. It's completely different. Maya frowned. Why would they change your ticket number? That doesn't make any sense. Ella scrolled back to the body of the email, looking for answers. Buried in the fine print was a brief explanation. If you have any questions about this update, please contact our customer service team. Ella's heart raced. This has to be connected, she said. What if this so-called technical issue wasn't a mistake? What if someone used it as an opportunity to swap my ticket with a fake one? Maya's eyes widened. That would explain the fraudulent transaction. If someone intercepted the update, they could have tampered with it before it reached you. But why? Ella asked, her frustration mounting. What's the endgame? Maya stood abruptly, pacing the kitchen. I don't know, but we're going to find out. First, we need to call the airline and demand to speak with someone higher up. If this email is part of their system, they'll have records of who made the changes. Ella nodded, feeling a surge of determination. She grabbed her phone and dialed the airline's customer service number, steeling herself for what was sure to be a long and frustrating call. As the line rang, she exchanged a glance with Maya, who gave her an encouraging nod. This wasn't over, not by a long shot. Ella was determined to uncover the truth, no matter how deep the rabbit hole went. Ella braced herself as the customer service line connected. A cheery automated voice greeted her, offering a menu of options. She impatiently pressed the numbers to bypass the usual labyrinth of choices, finally landing on the queue to speak with a representative. The hold music played in the background, an irritating reminder of how many others were likely also waiting for answers to their own, albeit less urgent, questions. When a voice finally came through, it was a young man who introduced himself as Daniel. Thank you for calling Northern Skies Airlines. How may I assist you today? Ella wasted no time diving into her issue, recounting the incident on her flight, the fraudulent transaction linked to her ticket, and the suspicious email she had found in her inbox. Her tone was calm but firm, every word chosen carefully to convey the seriousness of her situation. Daniel listened attentively, his occasional murmurs of acknowledgement encouraging her to continue. When she finished, he took a moment before responding. Ms. Johnson, I'm terribly sorry to hear about your experience. This is highly unusual, and I want to ensure we get to the bottom of it. Let me access your account and review the notes on your case. Ella glanced at Maya, who gave her a reassuring nod. The sound of Daniel typing filled the silence as Ella's anxiety grew. She could feel her patience wearing thin, but she knew she had to let the process unfold. Ms. Johnson, Daniel said after a few minutes, I do see the fraudulent transaction that was flagged. There's also a note here from our security team indicating that your ticket was altered in our system roughly 2 weeks before your flight. This aligns with the email you received. Let me dig a bit deeper into the records to see if I can identify who made the change. Please do, Ella said, her grip tightening on the phone. As Daniel worked, Ella's mind raced with possibilities. Could this have been an inside job? Someone within the airline tampering with passenger tickets for personal gain? Or was it a more sophisticated cybercrime operation targeting multiple travelers? Okay, here's what I found, Daniel said, breaking into her thoughts. The update to your ticket was made by an external user. This isn't common, but it can happen if someone has access to the booking system through a third-party travel agency or a compromised account. Ella frowned. I didn't book through a travel agency. I booked directly on your website. Daniel's tone grew more cautious. That's what makes this unusual. Whoever made the change used credentials that don't match your account. It's possible they exploited a vulnerability in our system or gained access through a phishing scam. Ella's frustration bubbled over. How could something like this happen? Don't you have safeguards in place to prevent unauthorized access? We do, Daniel said quickly. But no system is completely foolproof, especially against determined attackers. I'll escalate this to our IT and security teams for further investigation. In the meantime, I recommend monitoring your accounts closely for any unusual activity. Ella let out a bitter laugh. So that's it? You escalate it, and I just wait? Daniel hesitated. I understand your frustration, Ms. Johnson. I'll make sure this is prioritized. And as a gesture of goodwill, we'll be issuing you a full refund for your ticket, along with additional compensation for the distress this has caused. Ella sighed, knowing there was little more she could accomplish on this call. Fine. But I expect updates. I won't let this go. After hanging up, Ella turned to Maya, her frustration evident. They don't know anything. All they can do is escalate it and hope their security team figures it out. Maya's eyes narrowed. We're not waiting around for them. If someone's targeting you, we need to find out why. Let's dig into this ourselves. The two women spent the rest of the evening piecing together what they knew. Maya, ever the investigator, combed through online forums and news articles for any reports of similar incidents. Ella, meanwhile, scoured her own digital footprint, looking for clues that might explain how she had been targeted. It wasn't until late that night that they stumbled upon their first real lead. Maya found a thread on a cybersecurity forum discussing recent hacks targeting airline booking systems. Several users reported instances of their tickets being altered or stolen, often accompanied by fraudulent charges on their credit cards. This is it, Maya said, her excitement tempered by the gravity of the situation. It's a pattern. You're not the only one this has happened to. Ella leaned over to read the screen, her heart sinking as she absorbed the information. The posts described scenarios eerily similar to hers: unauthorized changes to bookings, suspicious emails from airlines, and a general lack of accountability from the companies involved. Look at this, Maya said, pointing to a specific comment. This guy says the hackers are part of a larger ring that sells stolen tickets on the black market. They target people who book directly with airlines because their systems are easier to infiltrate than third-party platforms. Ella felt a chill run down her spine. So this wasn't about me specifically. I was just collateral damage. Maybe, Maya said. But that doesn't make it any less serious. If this is a larger operation, there's a chance they're still monitoring your accounts. We need to secure everything, your email, your bank accounts, everything. The sisters spent the next several hours locking down Ella's digital life. They changed passwords, enabled two-factor authentication, and set up alerts for any suspicious activity. By the time they were finished, it was nearly dawn, and both women were exhausted. As Ella lay in bed that night, her mind refused to rest. The discovery of the hacking ring was a step forward, but it raised even more questions. Who were these people? How many others had they targeted? And, most importantly, how could she ensure they were brought to justice? The next morning, Ella woke to a flurry of notifications on her phone. Among them was an email from Dan Fields, the airline's head of security. The subject line read, "Urgent update on your case." Ella's pulse quickened as she opened the email. Dan had written to inform her that their investigation had uncovered new evidence linking her case to a broader cybercrime operation. The email included an invitation to meet with the airline's legal team and law enforcement officials to discuss the findings. Ella forwarded the email to Maya, her resolve hardening. This wasn't just about clearing her name anymore. It was about holding those responsible accountable, not just for what they had done to her, but for the countless others who had been victimized. As she prepared for the meeting, Ella felt a newfound sense of purpose. She had started this journey as an ordinary teacher, but now she found herself thrust into a fight much larger than she could have imagined. And she was determined to see it through, no matter what it took. Ella entered the conference room with her heart pounding, her mind racing with a mix of determination and trepidation. The room was bustling with activity. Airline officials, cybersecurity experts, and law enforcement officers were gathered around a long table covered with laptops, files, and charts. It was a far cry from the quiet simplicity of her classroom back home, but Ella reminded herself why she was here. This wasn't just about her anymore, it was about everyone who had been affected by this cybercrime operation. Dan Fields, the airline's head of security, approached her with a firm handshake. "Ms. Johnson, thank you for coming on such short notice. We've made significant progress in our investigation, and your case has been instrumental in uncovering the larger picture." Ella nodded, her gaze steady. "I appreciate the update, but I'm here to ensure this doesn't happen to anyone else." "What have you found?" Dan gestured for her to sit at the table, where a large screen displayed a series of flowcharts and diagrams. "To put it simply, we've confirmed that this wasn't an isolated incident. Your ticket was compromised as part of a sophisticated hacking scheme targeting multiple airlines. The perpetrators used phishing emails and software vulnerabilities to gain access to booking systems, altering tickets to resell them on the black market." Ella frowned. "And the fraudulent transaction linked to my ticket? Was that part of their scheme?" "Yes," Dan replied. "They used your ticket as a placeholder to launder money. It's a common tactic in these operations. The hackers generate fraudulent transactions to obscure their activities while selling stolen tickets to unsuspecting buyers." Ella leaned back in her chair, absorbing the information. "So what happens now? How do we stop them?" Dan exchanged a glance with one of the law enforcement officials, a stern-looking woman in a dark suit who introduced herself as Agent Ramirez from the Cybercrime Task Force. "We're already working on that," Ramirez said. "Based on the data we've gathered, we've identified several key players in the operation. Our goal is to dismantle their network, but it's a complex web. These people are highly skilled and operate across multiple countries." Ella's jaw tightened. "And in the meantime? What about the people they've already victimized?" Ramirez softened her tone. "We're coordinating with international agencies to trace the stolen tickets and provide restitution where possible. But it's going to take time. Cases like this are never straightforward." Ella felt a pang of frustration but kept it in check. "What can I do to help?" Dan gave her a reassuring smile. "You've already done a lot by coming forward and allowing us to use your case as a starting point. If you're willing, we'd like you to participate in a broader awareness campaign to warn others about these types of scams. Your story could make a real difference." Ella hesitated, the weight of the request settling on her. She wasn't someone who sought the spotlight, but she couldn't ignore the opportunity to prevent others from enduring what she had. "I'll do it," she said finally. "Whatever it takes to help." The next few weeks were a whirlwind. Ella became the face of the airline's new campaign, appearing in public service announcements and interviews to share her experience. She spoke candidly about the humiliation and fear she had felt, emphasizing the importance of vigilance and digital security. Her calm yet passionate delivery resonated with audiences, sparking widespread discussions about the vulnerabilities of modern travel systems. Behind the scenes, the investigation gained traction. Agent Ramirez and her team made several arrests, including a high-profile hacker who was believed to be one of the ringleaders. The busts were celebrated as a major victory in the fight against cybercrime, though Ramirez cautioned that there was still work to be done. For Ella, the experience was transformative. She returned to Greenville a different person, not hardened, but strengthened by her ordeal. Her students noticed the change immediately, their usually mild-mannered teacher now exuding a quiet confidence that commanded respect. One day, as she was wrapping up a lesson on ethical decision-making, a student raised their hand. "Ms. Johnson, is it true you helped catch some hackers?" Ella smiled, a hint of pride in her expression. "I played a small part," she said. "But it wasn't just about catching the bad guys. It was about standing up for what's right, even when it's hard." Her words lingered long after class ended, sparking conversations among the students about justice, courage, and the power of individual action. Ella couldn't have asked for a better outcome. Months later, Ella received a letter from Agent Ramirez. The task force had successfully dismantled the hacker ring, and international agencies were using their findings to strengthen security protocols across the airline industry. The letter concluded with a simple yet profound statement: "Your courage made this possible." Ella folded the letter carefully, a sense of closure washing over her. The experience had been harrowing, but it had also shown her the strength she hadn't known she possessed. And while the world of cybersecurity and law enforcement was far removed from her everyday life, she knew that her actions had left an indelible mark. As she placed the letter in a drawer, Ella thought about the lessons she would continue to impart to her students: the importance of integrity, the value of resilience, and the belief that even ordinary people could make an extraordinary difference. It was a legacy she was proud to carry forward, one that had been forged not just in classrooms but in the crucible of a fight she had never expected to face. And as she turned out the light and prepared for another day, Ella felt a quiet certainty. The world could be unpredictable, even dangerous at times. But with courage and determination, she knew she could face whatever came her way, and help others do the same.